Welcome back to Blent in the Bedroom. This is Patty O'Reilly, and today we have special guest Antonio from My Brother podcast, found on all platforms. All right, welcome. We're going to revisit a concept that we were talking about last time, which was the silent depression. And Aurelia, you had seen the Instagram videos about it.
Yes. So basically it was talking about how we are now in a depression, but it doesn't seem like it because we make so much more money than we used to. But if you look at it compared to like the cost of living, if you like take all of it into account, like house values and everything like that, and like compare it to the salaries have only gone up since, like, I don't know, I don't remember what the years that they picked, but it was like, let's say 1980. They've gone up, salaries have gone up about 12% on average, whereas house prices have gone up like, no, wait, I think house prices have gone up, yeah, like 40 something percent, whereas salaries have only gone up, much lower percentage. So now people have to spend like half of their pay on their mortgage, whereas before people could afford to have like a house and a lake house and a boat and all this, and could retire, which to me is the part that freaks me out the most, is that we probably won't be able to retire like previous generations have been able to.
How does that work, right? At some point, there's going to need to be a retirement of some kind.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many people now working like well into like their 80s, like well past when people should be able to retire. If you work your whole life, there's so many people out there that are saying that our way of life is a scam in the developed world, not even just in the US, but it's a scam because we work so hard to afford a house that that we're barely in because we have to work so much, and a car that we also don't really spend that much time in. And we do all this to afford just basic necessities to then probably never be able to retire. Like, the whole idea would be like, okay, we do this, we put in the work, and then eventually you can retire. That's a lot of times that's like the immigrant mentality. That's what I grew up with. But it's not really a possibility anymore. I mean, and we also got to consider, like, I don't think that kids are going to be able to leave at 18 realistically. Like, I don't feel like that's an age that we can really consider. I mean, I never really thought an 18-year-old was an adult, but they can at least start trying. But I mean, without having like 10 roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment, it's just not possible anymore, or not likely if for like a regular middle income, like middle class type of family, which is most of us.
Right. Antonio, what do you have to say about the silent depression and or the conversation thus far?
Well, I'm trying to figure out where to jump in. So what are we calling the silent depression? Like, what are the characteristics of that?
The pay versus how much the cost of living has gone up percentage wise, like interest rates and all that stuff. Because another thing is that interest rates, people argue, like the previous generation, boomers argue, well, they had interest rates of like 18%, but 18% on like a $70,000 house is still substantially lower than 7% on a $500,000 house, which is about the average house price in this country.
Okay. Well, I guess where do I start? In reference to the boomers, quote unquote, the interest rate and the cost of their house is honestly insignificant in the grand scheme of that argument. It's more about the wages. In their time frame, the wages they earned were closer to being basically you could work one job and support a whole household. That is not something that we can do now as easily or as readily, especially without a college education, which also costs a butt ton of money because of several other things. So yeah, they're definitely missing out on a lot of the fine details. But in an interesting, or I'd say interesting, shocking irony, they're also now suffering because their retirements, for those who do have them, are not going nearly as far as they were going because the value of the dollar versus the value of the goods and services they need are definitely very far apart now compared to what they used to be. So while they may have accumulated more assets for those sections of boomers who did, there are other ones who didn't accumulate assets and their families take care of them and so on and so forth. They're still feeling the heat. So it's at there's two pivot points of all of it: wages and oil prices. Those are the two biggest pivot points that are causing a lot of the problem.
Uh-oh. Okay.
That was weird.
Disconnected. Zoom didn't like what I said before. They really ain't gonna like what I got to say next.
Do
Right?
you think that's what it is? Why are you putting stuff like that in my head?
But
You know what? It's okay.
I don't want the FBI tracking me down,
the FBI doesn't have a problem with
talking
that.
about inflammatory information we're
It's
putting on
not
the internet.
inflammatory. It's the truth. At the end of the day,
Mm.
things are bad.
Yep.
I mean, we don't have it worse in other countries, which is in a sad way a blessing, because other countries, especially in Europe, are hurting way worse than we are right now. While we're dealing with high inflation, Europe's dealing with higher inflation. They haven't been able to do legislatively what our newest administration has been able to do to tamp it down. With that being said, they're also on the border of a war with Ukraine and Russia, and they're directly affected because of the oil that they all get from Russia. So, between OPEC and Saudi Arabia and what was the other country? There's another country that basically said, uh, we're gonna cut oil production just to raise prices, and nobody's gonna stop us. That's what they did. And then you also have the BRICS, which is going on, which they didn't invite the US, and nobody's surprised they didn't want us at the table. But also look at what's really being done there. It's just more colonial settlerism with a different face and being painted as something good when it's really just another scheme to rape Africa for more resources because China's running out of them and so is Russia.
This feels like a tangent, though.
No, this is all tied and connected. The reason why things are so high right now, between the oil prices being high, so cost of goods and services are going up because it costs more to get things to and from because of oil prices. And the other half of it is wages, where right now the wages are not where they so wages got raised at the beginning of the pandemic just to kind of get people working, or as we were coming out of it, wages did go up just to get people working.
Yeah.
People needed to work and they needed to make it worth it for them to go. So the wages went up, but so did the cost of everything else.
Yeah.
And the reason why this is all happening is artificial. Like right now, there's a lot of companies laying off thousands of people unnecessarily for two reasons. For one, to get control back over the working population, because right now the employees have all the power. And for two, is to get the wages back down. If they fire enough people and cause enough hurt where people are desperate, they're going to accept whatever wages there are to get back to work because they got bills to pay. They are officially causing these problems across the board, and they're blaming it on everything else that's red meat for Republicans to get at. If you look about right now, there's a whole big hoopla about what's going on in Philadelphia. Well, Philadelphia is not the only city with these smash and grab incidents going on. They're in every state in the U.S., but only ones that are red meat for getting people, in an uproar about something who don't fully understand that this is a widespread thing. Not to mention the fact that these businesses that are closing because of theft, they're using that as an excuse because if you look at their balance sheets, which are public, they'll show that they account for the theft in their stores, but they're taking bigger losses because people aren't buying retail as much anymore. So they're using theft as a way to get over on closing all these things down and say, oh, it's for the safety of our employees and our stores and all this stuff when it's not even that big of an amount. Like, look at Target. Target's blaming theft and they're shutting down like 6 stores. It doesn't account for enough. CVS got caught doing the same thing, saying, oh, we're closing down because of theft, when really they weren't selling enough. And then they were saying, oh, we're going to claim more losses for insurance money to cover our losses. And they got caught. Multiple corporations are doing it. A lot of this is artificial, and we got to pay attention.
And it's the people that complain about welfare.
Yep.
They're such hypocrites.
My mind is blown. Okay. Thank you. Can I tell you one little piece of that I saw the other day and I went, what the fuck?
Please do.
Okay. With regard to Philly, I was watching like the local Fox station report on the riots. And I was watching to see who they said the rioters, the looters were hitting. And I took notes on this video. And you just like put context to the whole thing that like was a question mark in my brain the other day about this. Okay. Yes. So I was listening for who was hit, because I think a thing that always stood out to me in reports of rioting and looting on the news was when it was local businesses, like small mom and pop shops, BIPOC owned type places that they were showing were being hit. And that always, like, I didn't know what to make of that, right? And so I was listening, and this was not that. And so now I'm questioning those reports, you know, like what I actually took from it before, because this was really clear that they hit Apple, Lululemon, and Foot Locker. And I was like, that is 3 big corporations. That is not their neighborhood. You know what I mean? Or like
This
their
was in
neighborhood
Philadelphia.
community. Yes. Yeah. And then, so what they were doing is they were showing like that there was no one on the street, like they had a person on the street. There was nobody actually on the street. So they had no footage of rioters and looters other than like security cameras of people coming in, grabbing and running in all of those stores. And that was all they had. It was like a few people. And they were trying to say, oh no, well, there's not rioters here, but perhaps over around the corner, it looks a lot worse than this. And I was like, no, it doesn't. If it did, you would be over there getting footage of it because that's what you like. And so I was like, why isn't, I was like, I think that's bullshit. I think that is bullshit.
Yeah.
So I
Easy
think there's
target.
like a few smash and grabs, and they're trying to call it a riot.
You know, actually, and this might be a little conspiracy theoristish. I think that it's very possible that sometimes they hire people,
Oh, they
like
100% do.
actors,
They've
to
been proven
yeah,
that they've been doing that for years and years and
yeah,
years. Where
Oh,
they'll
that
pay
makes
people to
complete
rob
sense.
stores and they'll overinflate the insurance claims.
yeah.
Oh my God, Lululemon? Like, who's robbing a Lululemon? Like, really?
That
Like,
is weird.
nobody. Okay, first, let's be honest about it. Young people are gonna do stupid stuff. Yes.
Mhm.
Did Lululemon get robbed, or does it get robbed? Yes. Are people reselling that shit? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, a pair of Lululemon tights is gonna cost you about $50. If you put
And
10
there's
more
so many
bucks,
cheaper options. I'm not surprised that they're running out of business. I mean, there's so many cheaper options to that. Like,
retail's going down. I mean, that's
yeah,
just the fact of this whole thing is retail is not what it used to be. So they were so used to these numbers. I mean, on top of all that, a lot of these corporations are doing record numbers, but they're laying off. Make that make sense. How you doing
Yeah.
record numbers, but you laying people off because there's not enough business? Well, one of these things ain't right. Either you're making more money or you're not. What are the layouts for? What is the purpose of them? Oh, you also want people to come back in the office or working from home. Well, I can imagine that would be a reason, because once you fire enough of them and people who are okay with coming in because they need a job, they're going to take it. These things are happening, which is unnecessary because there's so many incentives now to keep people employed. It's ridiculous.
that was fast.
I mean, we had a historic first a few days ago. The first president to get on a picket line with a union. That has never happened in U.S. history until a few days ago.
That did seem really important.
It is the most important thing that's happened all year, because we have a president who backs unions, which we don't have a lot of, full-throatedly, enough to go get on the picket lines and say, hey, there's a problem here. Mind you, this is the same Joe Biden who was in the Obama administration that helped save the auto workers years ago. So to make it full circle and come back where now they're fighting for wages, and he's like, yeah, you're right. The CEOs make too much. They're asking for, I believe it was a 36% raise over 4 years. That's 8% a year, which they're owed and definitely needed. Right now, at the cost of these cars, that's not really that hard for them to do. They're
Right.
profiting like crazy off of these cars.
So is it sucking it back down from the top where
Yeah,
it's
that's
all
really
been at?
what has to happen.
Because
And
I mean,
that's
they
what he
give
was
themselves
doing.
millions and millions of dollars a year in bonuses and raises. So it would, for me, I would feel differently about it, or I'd be maybe more like closer to neutral about the whole thing if it everyone, including the CEO, was only getting a 2% raise or whatever. I just think it should be kind of equal, right? Like I don't think that the employee shouldn't get a raise, but the CEO get these multi-million dollar bonuses or raises. It's
Well,
not fair.
Well, it's
the
a mis-
disparity between the top and the bottom is
yeah.
like, how does it make any fucking sense if we're all people on the planet? Like, there is no way that there is that much difference in value to the world by,
Definitely not.
oh my God.
And then to make it even worse is them doing that makes it harder for them to make money. If there's less money to circulate, how are you going to make money? People need to have the money to spend to buy your products. Well, they can't spend what they don't have. And if they're already working so many hours just to do that, and then you fire them and give yourself a raise, what the hell are you really doing but hoarding money?
Right. What was Reagan's thing? Trickle down economics?
Yeah, that bullshit.
Maybe that might be a good campaign. Hey, billionaires, time to fucking trickle it down because
Well,
we'll stop up your gears.
it's funny you say that. So the Republican debate was yesterday at the Reagan Library, which they're talking about Bidenomics not working, and I'm like, well, that's funny. You say that in the Reagan Library of one of the worst economic plans known to man
A lot of
that they
small
tried again
businesses
under the
failed.
Bush administration, and they tried to revamp in the Trump administration. Like all the people who were advisors to all those administrations should be put under several jails and chained and beat with licorice sticks. I said it. It's it's
Not
criminal
funny.
what they're doing. But with
Yeah.
that being said, we're in a good time where, again, we had a president on the picket line. That's a big fucking deal. That means there is power behind collective bargaining and people. We've had more strikes in the last few years than we've had in the last, couple of centuries. And the president has put legislation and funding behind getting people into unions, getting them good paying jobs, getting them trained. He's actually doing what he's supposed to do. He's incentivizing American industry, finding ways to put people to work where they can circulate their dollars where they live and actually be able to live. Like the work is being done. Like I get it, it still looks bad because it is bad, but it takes time and effort to fix things. I mean, look at Karen Bass in LA with the homeless issue. Like she's made leaps and bounds off of actually being intentional about what she's trying to do and putting in the work. And they've already reduced that population down significantly, and there's still more work to do. But she should get all the praise for stepping in and saying, look, this is what needs to be done, and I'm going to do it. Vote for me. They did. And there were results. And that's how it works. Whenever you're
Yeah.
connected to what actually needs to be done and you got a plan, or at the very least, you're open to figuring out solutions to actually fixing the problem, it goes a long way. And we're at that point where the solutions are there. I mean, if you listen to
Hang
15
on,
minutes of the Republican debate,
can you say that name again of the person you just mentioned?
Karen Bass,
Karen Bass. Thank you.
yeah, she's the what is it, governor, not governor of California, she's the mayor of LA.
Okay. Thank you.
But yeah, the Republican debate was funny because I watched the full first one and half of the second one. They're like 2 hours long. You know what wasn't talked about during the entire debate?
Mhm.
Policy. Not one policy was mentioned for actually fixing or doing anything. But it was all, oh, Bidenomics doesn't work. Oh, the unions are sucking up money and not giving us anything back. We need to get rid of them. These are the same people for the reason that we don't have pensions now. And the 401k is a big deal, which is risky as hell. Pensions were
Yep.
guaranteed. This is how much you're supposed to get when you're retired. Put in your time and you will get rewarded for it. And we're trying to bring pensions back. And what are they trying to do? Bust up more unions. America is the only country where it is legal to union bust.
Well, in other countries, it's in the developed world, it's considered a human rights violation to be anti-union
Right.
or to have anti-union policies. That's one of the ways that the US is more like the Middle East than other developed countries. Like it's more like the Middle East than it is like other developed countries. Is that's one of them. And then also there's some weird stuff that we do, like the Pledge of Allegiance is like very North Korea, apparently.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I've seen videos about this too. People that are foreigners, like they come here from. There's one guy, he's here from England. He's a teacher here, and he's like, "These are the things we see." You know, the whole like school shooting thing too. Like that like really freaks out people in other in like Europe, because that's not something that's normal. That like it's not something like we're normalizing this and doing these drills or whatever, but it's not something that really exists in the rest of the developed world.
Right. We're in a bad place.
Mm-hmm.
Antonio, I
And
feel like you can just really, you seem like you can see the overarching thing and then you can dive down into any topic.
well, I listen to people who do their research on a daily basis. So I
Who do you
listen
listen to?
to multiple people on Urban
You
View
would
on the
like
civics
Dr.
section.
Carr. I think you would like Dr. Carr.
Dr. Carr is amazing in how he can
Yeah.
pull it all together. And
Oh,
it's just he reads his library is bananas. Like I talked to Dr. Senyata, one of the people that runs a store near Howard University, and she's worried that he's gonna get crumpled by all of his books because he has so many books in his library
It's crazy.
that
All of it.
everywhere.
It's just wall. You don't see anything but books in the background. It's just like walls of just books.
Yeah, he's definitely well studied, but other people just paying attention to news sources and putting pieces together. The information's out there. We just gotta look.
yeah.
Need that because we're gonna need all the help we can get moving forward.
I think the hard part is to, at least for me, is to push aside the actual inflammatory comments and things like that on social media, because it's so easy to like to watch something like that and like freak out and like, oh my gosh, you know, this thing is so crazy, it's happening, but it's not the best, because first of all it causes anxiety, and second of all it makes you kind of like not really focus on the issue, the big issue. You're like paying attention to this like thing that these people are talking about. It's gonna hang
Right.
up.
So, but see, I think it makes me wonder if, you know, they're all like, hey, look over here, puppetry, media, social media, all the things, look over here. And then like they're doing whatever they want.
We can definitely
And
cover that on the other side of this break.
oh yeah.
So now that I've depressed everybody thoroughly, now for the good news.
Oh, I'm not depressed. I'm energized. I'm ready to like build a revolution. You know, that's all. Tell me how we
Okay,
do it.
fair enough.
Give me the hot tips. Let's see. We'll figure it
Well,
out.
so you touched on something there about the media doing the whole, wash this hand while I rob you with the other hand. And you're 100% right. Right now, the media is in a very bad place where, or at least the corporate media, they are on the whole ratings or money. That's what they're doing. That's why every time you turn on TV, Trump is everywhere because Trump gets ratings. Fox News is on the down, but CNN is on the up because it's Trump all the damn time. What did Trump do? Trump's 93 charges. Like, and mind you, these are things we need to know about, but there's also other things happening. For example, did you know that the Biden administration is going through and removing medical bills from people's credit reports so they're no longer affected by it?
No.
That's a huge deal,
Oh,
right?
I mean, yeah, if it's really happening, because often the way it comes across in corporate media or whatever, who God knows what I consume from media, but I feel like it sounds like there's a good thing happening and then afterwards someone else revokes it or something, right?
Well, yeah, but none of them are talking about it. You won't find anything good that Biden's done in corporate media because that doesn't get ratings. The president doing what he's supposed to do, that's boring. Nobody wants to watch that. That's not going to get me clicks and likes. It's at this point, it's clickbait. What's going to get people's eyes and get them activated about something so that they continue to consume and go down this rabbit hole while there are good things happening all around them. Inflation is going down at a very good rate, but you don't really hear about that. The was it the American Inflation Reduction Act, did help a lot. A lot of other initiatives helping. There's so much good stuff happening on a daily basis. But we're not hearing about it unless you're watching C-SPAN or you're just fully tapped in. That's damn ridiculous.
I
And
wonder
that's
how
at the
much of
corporate
it is
media level.
intentional.
It's all intentional. It's
No, I
corporate
mean,
media
how
level
much of
and
it is intentionally like from the administration side? Because once people start paying attention to that stuff, then the Republicans start, pushing against it.
well, here's the thing. The Republican side of the House has a propaganda wing that regardless of whether it's good, bad, or in between, if somebody got the flu, they have an outlet that puts it out to the masses for them to consume it. The other side, Democrats, do not have that. There's no outlet that is specifically for putting out all the good news that Democrats do. And they honestly don't have time to stop the good work they're doing to tell you everything they're doing all the damn time. I mean, yeah, it's a pipe dream with them. We're saying, I mean, they suck at messaging. That is a fact of life. We know that. But we also know what they're working against. So at what point do we need to say, okay, let me go look for what they're doing? Or let me talk to my Congress people when they're in town because they come home to talk to us for specific reasons to tell us, this is what I've done for you that you asked for, or this is what we're trying to do. I need you to light up Congress's lawns and let people know these things are important to you. C-SPAN is a free network. It doesn't get paid for ads. It is paid for by public funds, which means nobody watches it. Well, I say nobody. Very few
isn't
people watch it.
C-SPAN is generally like kind of just raw live footage.
Exactly.
But
And that's
there's
how
not
it
the
should be. You
commentary.
shouldn't have to digest it through multiple news networks, flavor of the month. Why would I do that when I can hear exactly what this congressperson said, word for word, out of their mouth on the floor? Or better yet, when there's a bill going through, I can see who voted for this bill that's going to help me or hurt me and what they think of what I need. Like, why would I wait for somebody else to tell me what they said when I can get it right from the horse's mouth?
Absolutely. I think the hard
That's
part is I mean, I struggle with wanting to know these things and like how the hell can I spend as much time as I otherwise would on C-SPAN? Because I totally agree that like watching it firsthand makes the most sense. And I have done that. And I guess I'm answering my own question because YouTube is a little bit helpful with that. If there's something showing up in a news commentary where something seems really blown out of proportion, to go and actually watch the footage has been helpful. But otherwise, digging into the bill itself, I don't know that it, even reading the bill, which I should do and don't, would make me know with more certainty that it would be for the greater good or for our benefit, because I feel like everything we do gets corrupted because people find the loopholes and find the way to do backroom deals that go around whatever, I just like, is that super cynical? Probably. And am I right to be cynical? I don't know.
I would say yes and no. It's funny you say that. I had a phone call recently and I get these all the time. I don't know why. They, for whatever reason, like calling me. Maybe it's them being sadists because I torture the hell out of these people. But these people were supposedly raising funds for police officers and their families. And I'm like, I was on one that day. Like, I was like, normally I'm just like, you got the wrong number. No, thank you. Or I let them get their spiel and I was like, no, I'm good, and hang up. This day, I was like, you know what? Let's do this. So I asked the question, so what is this actually for? And the guy's like, oh, I'm new. Let me go through our mission statement. And it's blah, 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 getting resources for police officers, this, that, and the other. We were like, okay, what are the resources? He couldn't tell me. He just kept going through this mission statement and talking about anti-police politicians and defund the police. And I'm like, oh, it's one of those type situations. And then he got really pissed at me when I told him there's no such thing as a anti-police politician. And he was like, are you serious? And I was like, yes, there are. Yes, I am serious, excuse me. Because you can't name one politician who's actually anti-police. Like they may not be okay with some things they're doing, but that doesn't make them anti-police. It just makes them anti them doing stupid shit. And then he tries to just go in circles and like, oh, well, I can't trust what they're doing because I don't know what they're doing and backdoor deals. And I'm like, you can watch everything they're doing on C-SPAN. It is right there for you to see. There's no backdoor deals. Everything they do has a paper trail. That's how that works. You may not see the negotiation, but when the fine print is done, you see who said what and that. You see the fine print of who signed on it. And the most important things is you see who said yes and who said no. That's the most important thing out of all those bills, other than what's in them. Who said yes and who said no? Because when it comes time for me to vote, when I asked you to get me rent control or get me things that I need, like, I don't know, more tax money for the schools so they can actually have what they need. Well, last I checked, one president got schools money to actually ventilate during COVID, and one told students to fuck off and go outside. And there's a paper trail for that. So I know which senators said yes and which said no. I know when it came to getting qualified immunity knocked out so that we can actually prosecute police officers that are doing wrong, I know which senator said yes, and I know which one said no. Forcing them to do a vote means that everybody can see the paper trail of what you're doing. You can talk rah-rah all you want, but when it comes time to make that vote, that's what really matters. That's why I don't even really listen to half the stuff they say, and I laugh at it when they do talk sideways, because it's like, you're full of shit. But if you're really going to talk that talk, are you going to walk that walk when it comes time to vote? And that's what really matters. We're about to go into a government shutdown right now because the House, mind you, the House hasn't really pushed any bills through to the Senate. They barely got anything through. They can't get their shit together to fund the government because they want to cut funding in several places that help people in a time when people need help. Silent depression, inflation, recession, whatever we want to call it, people are hurting and need help. But they want to cut funding to government services that help people. That does not make sense.
And we pay so much taxes. Like, I really think that, I mean, it's not even, like, it isn't fair that we have to pay so much taxes and it doesn't go to the people. Like, I would much rather my tax money go to teachers and whatnot than to, like, just police and their ineptitude and all that stuff.
Yes. And the war machine, that's where most of it goes.
Mm-hmm.
A big chunk. But these are two things that we're not going to get rid of funding, sadly. But with that being said, we can still fund the things we need to fund while arguing and getting those things sorted out. We have the funds to do it. The
We
problem
have
is,
billionaires to tax is what we have.
well, you know who's been taxing billionaires and making them pay taxes? The Biden
No.
administration.
Hmm.
They've already got $36+ million from billionaires who owe tax money and corporations that owed that money. They actually made them pay it. They have the receipts to show it. No network's talking about it.
No, they're not. I'm super pissed about this.
As
How?
you should be.
Yeah. So you're
So
looking like at raw data type things.
this is just, I mean, the articles are coming out, just not in the main outlets where they're going to get the most eyes. There are still news agencies that are reporting the news and things that are happening, but they're not going to get the eyes that a CNN or a CNBC or a Fox News are going to get, because they're not doing the red meat clickbait stuff. They're doing the actual information we need, which is their damn job, is to have
Right.
information to inform people. I mean, there's only so much I don't say edutainment, infotainment we can do until
Mhm.
we don't have anything left. It's like I have these conversations with my coworkers all the time about the literacy levels in the country and how a country with the literacy levels that we have is definitely going to have the problems we have because people aren't reading what they need to read. To read like newspapers or just read articles and understand like, okay, well, this is bias, this is bullshit, and this is what I really need to be able to run down through sources to find things. It's like we're at a point now where like even because of COVID, we got like 2 or 3 generations of children who are going to struggle because their connection with school broke. But if they were able to maintain their love for reading, they're going to be able to recover that in a decent amount of time. But there's so much work that these teachers and schools have to do to catch these kids up, because their environment at home isn't always the most conducive for them to be able to read or enjoy reading. And school does that work when it can. And yeah, you try, but when you're also struggling to figure it out yourself at home, like everybody went through it during COVID. I mean, COVID's not over, it's still here, but during the
Yeah.
throes of it, everybody suffered. So in the process of coming back from it, we got to get back to the basics. And literacy is one that we need as a whole, regardless of whether COVID hit or not. Like we don't even have a unified standard for literacy at the very least across the country. I was
Can
telling
I,
somebody, I'm sorry, go ahead.
can we dive into the literacy for a second?
Yes.
Okay, because I might have strong feelings about this. But I mean, I only have my one perspective with my kiddos. But I guess I've come to think of literacy more not in terms of like reading specifically, because there's many types of inclusive ways to read, like ear reading and things, which is awesome because we have devices that can do that now. So it like helps more people. But I've come to think of it in more in terms of uh, like processing of information,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, we're figuring out there's so many different kinds of brains, and they process information in such different ways. And so, I know with detailed information, that can be difficult outside of text and audio. Um, but I think that, even everything being available in video form can be so helpful for people who are more kinesthetic learners, because it's like bringing an emotion element to the way that they'll recall that information. Um, and so I guess I have started to think of literacy as being like literacy of the world being more important than the method by which that understanding is gained. And so for me, I couldn't understand why, like when I started teaching my specific kiddos, I couldn't, and like reckoning with how school does things, I couldn't understand why reading and math are the things that they care so much about early on. And like science and social studies is kind of a side dish. And like they figure they'll cover it later. And I'm like, but wait a second. You're expecting them to learn the math and the reading to understand the social studies and the science. But in fact, getting a context for the world through social studies and science seems more like the literacy that we might need as a established thing for kiddos, because some kiddos will just read naturally at 4, and others who are super dyslexic, if they're not pestered and bothered and made to feel stupid at school, will come to it all on their own somewhere between 10 and 11 in their own way, right? Because their brain was allowed to. So like I have so many feelings about all of this that I really want to push for the notion, and would love your feedback on it, that literacy might be better served in terms of information about the world and understanding how it works and how we're all a part of it first, no matter how that information reaches them. And as they're older and as their brains are more ready to take on mathematical concepts, and sorry, I'm getting like super worked up and passionate, mathematical concepts and like the nuances of grammar and things like that in written form, like it would just be so far outside of how we're doing things right now, but it just makes so much sense to me, at least for some kids. I can't say for all kids, but as a way of being like, hey, you're new here, here's what our world is like, it feels so important to me. So that was a lot of words.
No,
But if you
I definitely, I caught all of it, I received all of it, and I'm gonna say it's a both and. You're absolutely right. I remember as a child in school, reading comprehension was actually a big damn deal. You don't really
yeah
hear as much about it now, and reading comprehension comes in multiple forms and flavors, but at the end of the day, reading alone wasn't what the emphasis was. It was can you comprehend the information given to you by whatever means? That's why, there's word problems and there's math. It's giving you the same concept in different forms because some people, they're able to make a mental image, some need a physical image. But there was space in that for both of those, to the point to where reading comprehension was on the SAT, or excuse me, the ACT, which is the better test of the two between the ACT and the SAT. But also even for the ASVAB, for us to get in the military, reading comprehension is part of that. It is fundamental, but for whatever reason, they have shifted away from reading comprehension, maybe because they don't have time with all the other crap they got to do on a school day, and they thought that was a place to sacrifice, or whatever the case may be. But reading comprehension to me doesn't seem to be incentivized as much as it used to be. But there's no reason why they can't, because honestly, if anybody can digest a video, they should be able to go through reading comprehension and evolve it to the point to where a video is the same thing. You still got to take the same words, digest them, comprehend them, and then respond to them. So yes, both, and I 100% agree with everything you're saying. We need to incentivize reading comprehension in multiple forms and flavors for every child. And I think we will get a lot farther once we figure out a way to do that the way we used to, that worked, because that was a big deal. Like, just reading something, okay, you could read Edgar Allan Poe till you're blue in the face and not understand a damn thing he's saying, which some people are like that because you can't fully comprehend the environment he came from or the things that he went through or just where he's at and how he was feeling emotionally. Or, he had a sick wife, so he was just a lot of bad stuff happened to him. But if you can't even by a little bit put yourself in that place by understanding from the words he's saying, it makes it hard to fully understand the depth of his poetry. Or, reading like Moby Dick and trying to figure out, why is he so pissed off about this whale? Why does it make such a damn difference about catching this one thing? He could just go and live his life without, like, this isn't a big deal. There's a disconnect there, and reading comprehension, I think, is where it needs to be incentivized to pull it back, because otherwise we're throwing information at people that they don't fully comprehend, and we're microwaving it so fast that they don't have time to comprehend it because they got so much information coming at them now. They have to process 3 times as fast as we did because they got way more stuff coming at them. Like, the human brain wasn't processing as much information as it is now when we were children.
Right.
There's so much more. And now they have to basically break it down and slow it down because there's just too much.
That's true. Well, I guess really to dovetail in with what you're saying, when I'm talking about the notion of experiencing literacy by way of social studies and science, I don't mean it in the context of school subjects as we think of it. I mean, yes, videos, because they're useful, but I think, wouldn't it be cool to have more hands-on experience with seeing how things work and, understanding the world in a different way? And we're not there, I know that, but I guess these are the things that I keep figuring, if I say them out loud, they're being put into the universe, and maybe that's a start on something.
No, you're right. I agree. No, I was agreeing with that. So, and let's say social studies, for example. Social studies is a perfect example of seeing the world differently because it gives us access to different cultures that aren't our culture necessarily. So, like, it's weird when you first hear that in some places you don't shake with your right hand because that's the hand you usually wipe your butt with. But as you understand and learn about cultures, it starts making more sense because outside of that, you're not comprehending because you're only stuck with the little information you have. And now you need a full build of, okay, well, this is a thing, and these are the cultures that go along with it, and this is why. Or places where I remember initially learning about India where they worship cows. That's like, well, this is interesting and odd. Why do they worship cows? And then as you go through all the different pieces of India talking about why they worship cows, then it makes sense. You don't have to like it or agree with it, but you understand it enough to say, okay, this is a fact of life for somebody. And this is how things work there. And there's one way, especially for my little small town, social studies and National Geographics and things like that, that was my outlet to the world because I never
Yes.
thought I'd travel the world. I've always wanted to as a child. And when I finally did, it was like, this is so much better than National Geographic. Like they had great pictures and stories and all this stuff, but it's completely different when you experience it for yourself. But even then, I had to have that spark of interest. So that's why I was saying both, and I'm agreeing with you. Social studies is huge and it has to be put in there. I don't know if it's still introduced the way it used to be. I mean, I know with the attacks on different cultures and trying to push, Western European customs and traditions and history on the children as the only thing that's important is definitely going to hinder them because they're not going to have any real understanding of the world, especially in places where they're around diverse communities and don't understand this person's culture is this way for this reason. Don't be a dick about it. Respect their culture.
Right. Well, I think that is part of why I've appreciated videos on YouTube and stuff as a resource, Netflix too, because it is showing all these cultures and like as a way to learn, as a way to be able to share with the world who they are. And I mean, yeah, I guess you never know which ones have a lens that I'm, so indoctrinated into the culture that I'm still not catching what they're doing. That's, reinforcing colonialism and things. But I feel like there's a lot of really good resources out there that are respectful and beautiful and have definitely expanded my family's horizons about the world and different people and how different cultures do things, what they eat, how they live, how, even like what would be our ancestry in Europe lived in like the 11th century and stuff like that. And holy shit, life was hard, y'all. Like
Mhm.
all of us humans who are here now should be pretty proud that we all made it here, but then be like, oh, but we did some bad things on the way here, and maybe it's time to do this better. Because if we can see it now, it's time. We're connected. Okay, sorry, I got a little high. That was very stony thoughts.
I love that we can see I love to follow the regular people on social media. That might sound weird, but I think that it's easy for us to look at, oh, everyone in Africa is poor, or we only look at, the fancy people and that go to Oxford or whatever. But with social media, I follow people that are just regular, like a Scottish witch literally living in Scotland, and somebody in Ireland. Like I definitely follow people in Ireland, some Swedish people, some people in China. Those are harder because I don't speak the language, but I can at least see what they're doing. Like regular, just like working on a farm on a mountain in China. I think it's so cool.
Yes.
A lot of people in Africa, South America. I think I follow some an Argentinian apothecary person, like just regular people that just educate of what it's really, really like in this culture.
Mm-hmm.
I love
I
it. And I hope
love
it
it
never goes
too.
away.
Yes. I know it's so cool to be able to see what people do everywhere. And even there was some, like a photographer living in her van, and then she lived in Portland for a little while. And so I was like, oh, wouldn't that be weird if I saw her? So it's people like that. And then it's like there was a lady who was like like definitely upper middle class woman from that looked of Indian descent, and her partner, and they were just hilarious, playing pranks on each other and jokes and stuff. But it was just like all these people of every place and story and position in the world as it sits in capitalism.
And religion. Like I follow
Yeah.
too some I went through a time where I wanted to learn more about real Muslim people, like what is
Yeah.
really like, because I think we see it as like, oh, they oppress, women and all that stuff, right? Because we're only looking at the extremes like we do with most groups. But it's not that simple, like in all of it, like yes, there's extremes, yes, that's true in all religions and groups, but the like in a typical way, like they choose it, the women choose it, and both sides have responsibilities. It's not for me, for sure, I know that for a fact, but it's not what I grew up thinking. like they even their because I follow couples usually, and I thought that the women didn't have a choice, or that anyone didn't have a choice, but the girls, or I guess everyone, but the girls specifically, they get to choose. They don't have to wear a hijab if they don't want to, but they get to choose when they get older if they want to. So of course they get raised as Muslims, but I mean, I just didn't know that there was choice there. And I love that I got to actually like learn about that from actual people.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Isn't that great? I mean, maybe that has to be what we try to use as our strength to unify us back again.
I mean, not everybody can travel. Like you learned that through a YouTube video. I learned
Yeah.
that firsthand talking to people when I was in the Middle East because they explain like it's a relationship between the father and the daughter, or the wife and the father, or the brother, and it's just like there's so much more to it, and it's not
Yeah.
as simple as we think. And to see people in their own environment, especially, goes a lot farther because to see anybody outside of their culture and an environment that is otherwise hostile because it's not their norm, they may not necessarily react or act the way they would normally do. So they have to adjust to where they're at. And with the amount of people that move here because of oppression and poverty and war and famine in other countries, I mean, that is the American story, you know, quote unquote, that people are coming here to do better because there are more resources here than where they came from.
I mean, that's always been true. No one comes here because they had it so great somewhere else that they wanted to spread it. Like everyone that's here came because like ancestrally speaking, I mean, I'm sure that rich people move here from like China or whatever, but like historically speaking, people came here to get better than what they had. But I had only ever known in real life African Muslims, and which is very different than Middle Eastern Muslims. So I didn't realize, because the African ones, it's only a scarf on their heads, at least the ones I knew, not the whole face. So that's why I thought that the face thing was just like, it was a man, like they don't want anyone looking at their wives. I had preconceived notions that were ignorant, and yeah, I've learned since better, and
Am I wrong though in thinking that Saudi Arabia requires women? Is it no Saudi Arabia? Where is
Saudi
it that
Arabia does have some things for women that aren't great. They have definitely got a lot of human rights violations that they need to be addressed. We definitely do too. I heard a thing recently.
yeah.
What was it? Not World Health. It was one of like the world. It's like the World Rights something that has a scorecard on like all the countries. Yeah, we're pretty bad.
Well, I think isn't
we're
Saudi
behind
Arabia
a
like
lot of
killing
other
girls in
countries.
schools? Is that what we still talking about Saudi Arabia?
No, I was
Oh.
switching to us.
Oh, you did? Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
definitely, a lot of countries have, you know, human rights violations, and they're not all being addressed the way they should be. But I have to find which one it was, but it was like the World Rights something. But yeah, where our report card is pretty bad, along
Is
with
the,
a lot of other countries.
did you say that's the UN? They did the reporting?
I know it wasn't the UN; it was a separate organization from the UN, but they go through and look at like all the human rights violations of the different countries and give them a scorecard on where they're at, and like treatment of like children and women and other things like that.
Yeah. Fuck. I mean, I know the US maternal death rate is really bad.
It's ridiculous for having the resources we have.
That's the part that I think is crazy, is because it doesn't have to be this way.
No,
Right.
and this brings up another conversation. I have some fun conversations at work. So I was talking to one of my coworkers and saying like,
Come closer.
sorry. I was talking to one of my coworkers and we were talking about single payer healthcare. It stemmed off from a conversation about the military and how the military has single payer healthcare, and it's funny that people are so against it, even people who were in the military. And it's like, do you not realize you've already done that? And then one of my coworkers was like, yeah, but can we afford that? And I was like, yeah, we can afford that. It's like, honestly, it would be cheaper for us to do it that way. And I explained to him why the Affordable Care Act would have gotten us closer to that than we are, if not for the interference and all the other stuff that happened to block it. But even if we only did the single payer healthcare, we could easily afford it, and it would actually lower our taxes. We would pay less taxes because you would have more people tied to the system paying into it. But also, you can actually regulate it to the olden days where there were two prices. There was the price you paid for without health insurance, and then there's the price you pay for with health insurance. I want to say it was around the Reagan administration where something happened and they basically just tied it all together. You didn't used to have to pay the health insurance price if you didn't have it. And then they muddled it and now everybody had to pay it. It used to be way cheaper to go to the hospital. And if they go back to a single payer healthcare system, they could regulate that down to negotiable and easy to pay prices where healthcare doesn't need to cost you as much as it costs. It's doable with the amount of tax revenue we're already generating.
I believe that. Thing I always come to is, holy fuck, now what do we do? So
I have
take
the
it
answer for that.
away, Antonio.
We pay attention to our local elections and our local ballot measures to make sure what they're doing actually benefits us. And if it doesn't, boot their asses and find somebody else. We have to know what we want. We have to ask them for things, number one. And if they don't deliver what we ask for when they're in that position, whether we voted for them or not, we vote them out collectively. We have to be able to say, okay, well, if you said you're going to get all the potholes fixed on my street and you did it and you don't have a good reason why, then it's time for you to go. We start at the local level and we build our way up, but also pay attention to what's happening. Voter registration, we have an election coming up, and there's a lot of things being done where we need to really pay attention because these states that they know they're going to lose or they're at risk of losing, i.e. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Georgia being further solidified, Florida.
Ooh, good.
There's a lot of efforts to keep these places under oppression through just really shitty tactics. So pay attention, check your voter registration, be aware of what's going on in your local politics and let it build up, and also pay attention to what the administration is doing. They're not going to do everything you like, and they may not be your candidate, but they got the job. So ask, demand of them what you need. The government shutdown, people are going to suffer because of this. Do not forget this. It needs to be remembered when it's time to go to those ballot boxes, when it's time to get out and fund these campaigns and organize and understand that policy over personality.
Yep. How do we ask them for what we need? How do we demand it? What do they listen to?
Well, they can use the 5 Calls app, and it helps them see the things that are on the boilerplate. They could look up their local representatives and call them directly. They have city council meetings, and well, not city council meetings, but they have meetings when they come back from DC for the federal, for the state ones. They're doing the work daily. You can also see what they're doing because most of them do broadcast what they're doing. The same way that the federal Congress does, the state Congresses do. Everything they're doing, they're talking about it, they're broadcasting it. Hell, some of them are still doing Zoom videos for these meetings. Get in there.
Okay.
A lot of them are hybrid now.
Like this, it's there. It's got to be done.
Okay. I am finding it to be such bullshit that I feel so stupid. Like, I don't know these things. I don't know how to engage. I mean, it shouldn't be an excuse, but I'll say it anyway. Like, my parents were very anti-political. Like, they didn't vote ever. And so I just feel completely, and I should at this point do it, but I vote, but I don't even know exactly how to find these things or how these things work. And civics is something that is missing from school, if you ask me, and I think it's
Definitely.
fucking intentional.
Yes.
There is no way in hell it's not intentional to the corporate industry that provides cool stuff. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm not going to go off on that tangent.
I mean, you're right, though. We don't have unified standards, so it's determined by the state. If you're in a state that actually incentivizes it, then you're going to learn these things. That's just how it works. So it's even more important in that manner to be involved in what's going on at the state level and the local level, because That's where these things are being determined. That's how Florida was able to get away with the shit they're doing, because federal government can't tell them but so much about what they're doing with these curriculums. There is no federal standard. They're trying to get rid of the Department of Education because they're trying to set a standard. They're trying to set equal funding while they're trying to push fucking charter schools. Like, that's going to help people. School choice. You should be able to take your child to a school of your choice. Really? Well, it's not going to help if you fuck up all the ones in my neighborhood, and the ones that I need to go to, I have to get a damn scholarship to go to because of the grant system that you made, i.e. Louisiana. And how well has that worked out for their education system? I think they're in the bottom 50.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, we got to start connecting dots. Start small where you're at and start working your way up. I mean, politics has been, given this view of it's not connected to my life when it's literally your everyday life.
Oh
And
my
once we
God,
get to that
exactly.
understanding, it will make everything a lot different. Even if, one issue people follow through on that one issue.
Yeah. Thank
That's
you
all
for
I
that.
got.
Oh,
Thank
we
you
got
for
like
that.
a minute.
Well, that concludes this episode of Blunt in the Bedroom. Thanks, Antonio, of My Brother Podcast.